The call came on a drizzly Tuesday morning as I sat at my desk, halfway up the Hancock Tower, my laptop open and acquisition reports glowing on the screen. The Chicago skyline outside looked grey and endless. I was already 3 sips deep into my first coffee when my phone lit up with the name Jennifer Williams. In this city, everyone knew Jennifer. She was the most sought-after wedding planner, and her client list included politicians, tech billionaires, and even one Oscar winner. Her voice, when it came through, was gentle, hesitant, and more apologetic than I'd ever heard. "Mrs. Harper, I am so sorry to have to call you like this," as she started, sounding like she genuinely wished she could be anywhere else. "But your family has requested to remove your name from all the wedding arrangements. Everything, from the flower list to the seating chart, even the photo requests. I've never had to make a call like this before, and I just want you to know it's not personal." A chill passed through me, not from the words, but from their familiarity. It wasn't the first time my family had quietly erased me from an event, and I doubted it would be the last. I leaned back in my leather chair, glancing at the glass windows that showed off the city's most famous buildings, at least 3 of which I owned through shell companies. I let the silence stretch, counting my heartbeats, before I finally answered. "That's perfectly fine, Jennifer. Thank you for letting me know." She paused, clearly thrown off by how calmly I'd taken the news. "Mrs. Harper, most people would be devastated, or at least angry." I smiled, picking up a silver pen and idly spinning it between my fingers, my gaze dropping to the property deed that sat on my desk, stamped with the name Lakeview Plaza. That exclusive event hall, the crown jewel of Chicago's North Side, was where my younger sister Lauren's wedding would be held in exactly 3 weeks. "Don't worry about me, Jennifer. I'll be just fine," I said, my tone light but firm, leaving no room for pity. What Jennifer didn't know, what my family never bothered to ask, was that I wasn't just a Megan Harper, the quiet one, the sister who always showed up late to dinners and supposedly worked a dead-end job at a property management office. I was Megan Harper, CEO of Harper Investments, owner of a real estate portfolio worth over $2.6 billion, a portfolio that included half the luxury venues in Illinois and a good chunk in New York and Texas too. Lakeview Plaza was one of my favorite properties, a fact that nobody in my family seemed to know or care about. Family had always been about unspoken roles. Lauren, my younger sister by 2 years, was the golden child. She was beautiful, confident, always center stage, and engaged to Adam, a rising star attorney from a family even more polished than ours. She'd graduated from Northwestern with honors and immediately joined Dad's agency, where she was the heir apparent. My parents threw parties for her every birthday, her graduation, her engagement, her first big real estate deal. Lauren's photos covered the walls in my parents' suburban home in Evanston, all sunlit and smiling. I was the other daughter, the disappointment, the odd one out. I'd refused Dad's offer to join the family firm after business school and had taken what everyone assumed was a junior job at some random property company. I lived in a immodesty apartment in Logan Square and drove a 5-year-old Toyota that my mother never stopped joking about at family gatherings. Lauren, meanwhile, lived in a high-rise downtown and drove a new Lexus. But what nobody knew, what they had never bothered to find out, was that my supposed dead-end job was a cover. I had built my company quietly, brick by brick, property by property, in the shadows. While they were busy toasting Lauren's every small success, I was putting together deals, closing on buildings, and assembling a team of the sharpest minds in the city. I had personally overseen the purchase and restoration of Lakeview Plaza, a deal that made the local business news but, as usual, nobody in my family had read. As I looked out at the city, I thought back to all the times I'd been left out before. The forgotten invitations to birthday dinners, the family trips I learned about after they happened, the holidays where Lauren would announce her news, engagements, promotions, new cars, at events that were supposed to be for me. I'd learned a long time ago that sometimes the most powerful answer is silence. This time, though, I felt something different: relief. A sense of freedom I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. If they didn't want me at the wedding, so be it. I'd still own the building where their perfect party would happen. I ended the call and let myself smile for real, alone in my office, a cup of now cold coffee at my elbow, the city of Chicago sprawling beneath me like a game board I already knew how to win. Jennifer's call kept echoing in my mind as I closed the laptop and glanced around my office, its every detail shaped by my choices: modern art, fresh flowers, floor-to-ceiling glass with the skyline shimmer. Sometimes, I wondered if anyone in my family had even a clue about this version of me. The real me. No one in my family knew that behind my reserved public image, I was a force to be reckoned with in Chicago's real estate world. Not even my parents. Not Lauren. I'd played the part of the quiet daughter so well for so long that it became a kind of shield, one that let me work in peace while everyone else focused on Lauren's glittering ascent. Lauren was always the center of every family story. Even as kids, she charmed teachers and relatives alike with her smile, her achievements, her relentless optimism. By high school, she was homecoming queen. By college, she had her future mapped out: degree, dream job at dad's firm, high-rise apartment, a future engagement ring always on the horizon. She fit perfectly into the world my parents envisioned, a world of glossy holiday cards, charity events, and dinner parties in the suburbs. Me. I was the independent one, the daughter with a potential but not enough drive, the one who turned down the path set out for her. My parents always said they wanted me to be happy, but they also never hid their confusion, sometimes even disappointment, about my choices. After my MBA, I declined my dad's offer to start in his commercial division. Instead, I took an entry-level analyst job at a tiny property management startup nobody had ever heard of, with a salary that barely covered my rent and ramen noodles. Dad was quietly horrified. Mom, more vocally so. For a while, I played into their assumptions. I let them think I was just scraping by, working in some boring office. When Dad would ask how work was going, I'd answer with a shrug and change the subject. At family dinners, if the topic shifted to business, I'd retreat into silence and watch as everyone toasted Lauren's latest client win or Adam's new law partnership. But all the while, I was learning. I worked under a boss who ran a tight, honest operation and taught me everything from the ground up: how to read a zoning map, how to spot undervalued neighborhoods before anyone else, how to build trust with tradespeople and city officials. My days started before sunrise and ended well after dark. While Lauren was sharing vacation photos from Maui, I was touring neglected apartment buildings on the south side or negotiating with contractors in the rain. At night, I pored over financial models, devoured every book on property investing I could find, and tracked market trends obsessively. I saved every bonus, every penny, cutting corners everywhere I could. My first purchase was a rundown 4-unit in Oak Park. I maxed out my credit cards for the down payment, lived off takeout, and managed the property myself. It was terrifying, and for months, I barely slept. 6 months later, after a lot of sweat equity, new paint, and some creative advertising, the building was at full occupancy, bringing in enough cash flow to refinance, pay down my debts, and even invest in another property. That became my formula: find hidden gems, turn them around, either hold them for steady income or flip them for a tidy profit. By year 3, I owned 10 properties outright. By year 5, I'd founded Harper Investments, quietly incorporating so no one would tie the company name back to me. My properties were spread across 3 states, each one chosen with the kind of precision Dad had always said I lacked. Nobody in my family noticed, of course. To them, I was still the one who couldn't decide what she wanted. Meanwhile, Lauren's world sparkled ever brighter. Dad gave her more and more responsibility at the agency. Mom made a point of telling everyone about her daughter's perfect life in Lincoln Park, her beautiful apartment, her new car, her upcoming wedding to Adam, who was the kind of man you introduced with pride. Lauren was on track to inherit the agency one day. She even hosted charity galas in our parents' name, always making sure photographers caught her best angle. But I noticed something else, too. As Lauren's wedding planning ramped up, so did her efforts to push me further and further to the margins. At first, it was small things. She'd forget to copy me on family group texts about showers or dress fittings. Then came the not-so-subtle comments. "Megan, are you sure you want to be involved? It's going to be pretty expensive. You probably have to work that weekend, right?" Or, "I'd love for you to help, but I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable with Adam's friends. You know how successful everyone will be." When Mom called me to say they'd decided it was better if I didn't come to the wedding, she dressed it up as concern for my feelings. "We just want to keep everything drama-free, honey. Lauren's really stressed, and you know how she is. We want her day to be about her." I almost laughed at the absurdity. I hadn't caused drama in years, not when they forgot my birthday, not when Lauren hijacked my promotion dinner with her engagement announcement, not even when they left me out of family vacation photos. I'd learned early that my greatest power with my family was my silence. They expected me to protest, to beg, or to make a scene. But I never did. I always let them underestimate me, just as I'd always planned. So when Jennifer called that Tuesday, I realized, with a sudden, odd sense of lightness, that I'd been preparing for this moment for years. Exclusion wasn't a punishment anymore. It was permission to finally be myself, no longer defined by what my family saw, or didn't see, in me. As I closed my office door and watched the clouds drift past the skyscrapers, I finally let myself laugh. It was a quiet laugh, but it was real. That evening, I walked the long way home, weaving through the Gold Coast as the last traces of sunlight slid behind the city's tallest buildings. People hurried past in elegant coats, arms filled with shopping bags, talking about theatre tickets or last-minute dinner reservations. Sometimes, I imagined I could slip right through that crowd without anyone ever knowing who I really was, or what I'd built. My apartment in Logan Square was nothing fancy. It was bright and tidy, with exposed brick and tall windows that overlooked a sleepy, tree-lined street. On the surface, it matched everyone's expectations, a starter place for someone figuring things out. But behind an unmarked door at the end of the hall was my real workspace, a private office filled with maps, property plans, and digital dashboards tracking my portfolio across Illinois, Minnesota, and even parts of Texas. I unlocked the door, tossed my bag onto the sofa, and turned on my computer. The screen flickered to life, displaying the Harper Investments dashboard, a web of addresses and numbers, green for gains, yellow for it needs attention. My phone buzzed with a message from my assistant, Rachel. Closing confirmed on the Bucktown duplex. Final docs signed. Congrats, boss. I let myself breathe. Each new property, Each line of code on my spreadsheets, each tenant review, these were the small victories that nobody in my family cared to notice. The world they valued was one of cocktail parties and status symbols. The world I built thrived in spreadsheets and legal filings, risk, and the kind of quiet confidence you only develop after years of being doubted. Back when I started, I'd been scared out of my mind. I still remembered my first deal, a shabby 4-unit, faded yellow paint peeling, neighbors who kept to themselves, and an owner desperate to sell. I put every dollar I had on the line, signed a mountain of paperwork, and spent sleepless nights fixing broken faucets and arguing with utility companies. The day my first tenants paid rent, I cried in the parking lot out of pure relief. People said it was luck, but it wasn't. It was obsession. I pored over every lease agreement, studied Chicago zoning laws, joined investment forums online, and showed up at city council meetings. I learned to ask questions no one else bothered to, and to find value where everyone else just saw problems. By my 3rd year, I was running 6 buildings, reinvesting every cent, and negotiating directly with contractors who, at first, didn't take me seriously. But I persisted, learned the tricks of the trade, and gained a reputation for being fair but firm. Most of my nights were spent calculating margins and my weekends patching drywall. While Lauren posted photos from Paris or Cabo, I posted receipts for dumpsters and new appliances. I didn't resent Lauren, not really. She was a product of our family's world, a place where appearances mattered more than substance, and where being a seen was valued above being a known. Our parents had always loved us in their own way, but the lines were clear. Lauren was the prodigy, I was the afterthought. Dad tried, in his awkward way, to bridge the gap. He'd ask, how's your little company doing? Or any luck with that duplex? But he never pushed for details, never asked why I worked so hard or what my real goals were. Mom was more blunt. I just want you to be secure, Megan. Real estate is risky, and it's so competitive. If she noticed my exhaustion, she never mentioned it. It hurt, but over time, I realized it gave me something Lauren never had: freedom. They didn't expect much, so I could build at my own pace, make mistakes, and take risks. Lauren, meanwhile, lived in a glass house. Every move she made was watched, measured, and compared. Still, there were days the loneliness pressed in. Birthdays spent alone with takeout, phone calls that went unanswered, and holidays where I was accidentally left out of the group photo. The sharpest moment came the night Lauren announced her engagement, at what was supposed to be my promotion dinner. She swept into the restaurant on a wave of excitement, flashed her ring, and the rest of the night became about her. I'd spent months preparing for that moment, hoping maybe this time my parents would celebrate me. Instead, I watched my news fade under the sparkle of a diamond. After that, I made a silent promise to myself: I would build something that couldn't be ignored. Not for revenge, but for me. As I grew my company, I kept my personal life simple. My apartment stayed small, my car practical, my wardrobe unremarkable. People were always surprised to find out I was the owner when I'd show up to meet with tenants or city officials. That anonymity became my greatest asset. As Lauren's wedding approached, the gap between us only widened. She called sometimes, but the conversations were shallow, details about flowers, cakes, or her bachelorette trip to Miami. When I asked how she was feeling, really feeling, she'd quickly change the subject. I tried to offer help, to be included, but her answers were always polite, distant, and evasive. "Megan, I just don't want you to be uncomfortable," as she'd say. It's going to be a very upscale crowd. Or, are you sure you want to spend money on a dress for one night? The message was clear. She wanted a picture-perfect day, with no reminders of the sister who'd chosen a different path. But what Lauren, and my parents, didn't know was that Lakeview Plaza, the very venue they'd chosen as the pinnacle of their social circle, belonged to me. I'd bought it 18 months earlier, after the previous owners went bankrupt. I'd spent months overseeing the renovations, bringing in a new team, and turning the failing hall into the most coveted event space in Chicago. Every detail of that building, the marble entryway, the sweeping staircase, the terrace overlooking the lake, was my vision. The city's elite scrambled for dates. Lauren's wedding would be the highlight of the season. Written up in local magazines and splashed across Instagram. And the checks, each one made out to Harper Investments, landed right in my account. As I stood in my little home office, the hum of the city outside, I allowed myself a moment of pride. My family didn't see me. But the city did. The world I'd built did. And, soon enough, so would they. The next morning, as I poured coffee in my kitchen, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Her messages always came early, as if she thought she could get my answer before the day's doubts set in. Megan, we've decided it's best for everyone if you sit this one out. Lauren's wedding is meant to celebrate her success, and we want to avoid any family tension. I know you'll understand. I stared at the words, feeling nothing and everything all at once. How many times had I been told that it's best for everyone if I was somewhere else? Birthdays, holidays, even simple dinners, always some reason why it would be less complicated if I just didn't come. I typed out my response. Of course, Mom. I want Lauren to have her perfect day. Her reply came in seconds. Thank you for being so mature about this. Lauren was worried you'd make a scene. I actually laughed. A real, loud laugh that startled me. A scene? The last time I'd raised my voice at a family event, I was 14 years old. Since then, I'd learned to be invisible, to listen and disappear, to never give them the satisfaction of seeing me wounded. I sipped my coffee, letting the moment settle. There was pain, yes, always pain, but also a strange sense of power. Their rejection wasn't a surprise anymore. If anything, it was permission to finally drop the act. No more pretending I cared about their approval. I'd already built a life that was bigger than their small vision of who I was. The day blurred by in a haze of meetings and calls. I negotiated a contract for a new apartment building on the west side, approved a renovation budget for a hotel in Minneapolis, and reviewed marketing plans for Lakeview Plaza. My team was sharp and efficient. They respected me in a way my family never had. Late that afternoon, as the sky outside my office went gold with the setting sun, I paused to look at the Lakeview Plaza schedule. Lauren's wedding was circled in red, a date I'd blocked off months ago, long before the exclusion. It was almost funny. The most important event in my sister's life, held in a space she didn't even know I owned. I opened the contract file. My legal team had drafted the Lakeview Plaza agreements to be airtight, strict timelines, clear behavioral clauses, cancellation policies, every contingency planned for. I'd learned the hard way that protecting your assets sometimes meant protecting yourself from people closest to you. Buried near the end of the document was a clause I'd added myself. The venue reserves the right to cancel any booking with 72 hours notice, for any reason, with a full refund of all deposits. I'd used that clause only twice, Once when we discovered an event was a front for an illegal gambling ring, and once when a client became abusive toward my staff. Both times, I'd received threats and angry calls, but I'd stood my ground. The plaza's reputation mattered more than any one booking. Now, reading the clause, a wild, impossible idea flickered through my mind. What if I used it now? What if, instead of letting my family erase me from their celebration, I made myself impossible to ignore? The thought felt dangerous. Petty. Vindictive. Even. But underneath was something else, a yearning for justice, for balance, for the chance to finally be seen. Not just as Megan, the quiet one, but as the woman who owned the roof over their heads, the woman whose work built the space where their dreams unfolded. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Rachel. "Boss, do you want me to confirm the final payment from the Harper wedding?" The last wire just came through. I hesitated, then said, "A yes." "Actually, can you pull the full contract file and flag any clauses about cancellation? I want to review them tonight." Rachel, ever the professional, simply said, "You got it." I hung up and stared at the city lights. From up here, everything looked small. Even the biggest problems shrank into miniature. I wondered if my parents ever thought about what it was like to be excluded, to watch from a distance as everyone else toasted and laughed without you. I wondered if Lauren, on her perfect day, would spare even a single thought for her only sister. I doubted it. When I was a child, I'd clung to the hope that one day things would change. That I'd do something so impressive, so undeniable, they'd have to love me. That hope had faded years ago, replaced by ambition, determination, and the quiet comfort of building something lasting. My family believed they could erase me with a text, with a phone call, with a wedding invitation that never arrived. But you can't erase the truth. You can't erase the owner's signature from the deed. And you can't erase the fact that, in 3 weeks, they would gather under my roof, whether they wanted me there or not. I stood by the window, watching the night settle in, and made a decision. I wasn't going to let them define me anymore, not by what they gave, not by what they withheld. This time, I would write my own part in the story. The days that followed slipped into a rhythm, one so familiar it almost felt comforting. I lost myself in work, in spreadsheets and site visits, in back-to-back meetings with contractors and bankers and lawyers. The more my family receded into the background, the more focused I became. Every morning, I jogged along the lakefront, letting the wind and waves clear my head. I mapped out ideas for new acquisitions and rehearsed hard conversations with myself. Each time I ran past Lakeview Plaza, its restored limestone arches gleaming in the sunrise, I felt a flicker of pride. I knew every corner, every light fixture, every secret hidden in that building's old bones. As Lauren's wedding date crept closer, the city's gossip circles buzzed about the event of the year. Invitations had gone out weeks earlier, thick envelopes with gold script, the kind meant to be posted on refrigerators or bragged about over brunch. I got mine secondhand. A friend of a friend sent me a picture, joking, "This looks fancy. Wish I made your family's A-list." Lauren's planning was as elaborate as I'd expected. According to social media, she'd hired the best florist in the city, booked a photographer whose fees started at 15 grand, and ordered a designer cake that would have made Marie Antoinette jealous. Every update was another glimpse into a world where no expense, or detail, was too small for scrutiny. Lauren even posted a story, laughing with her friends, surrounded by mood boards and fabric swatches. Her caption read, "I can't wait for the most magical day. Only the best for my people." The irony, of course, was that their best was built on foundations I'd poured, literally and figuratively. Lakeview Plaza's transformation was my proudest achievement, taking a crumbling old ballroom and turning it into a landmark for Chicago's most exclusive events. My team worked tirelessly, restoring stained glass windows, salvaging marble, rewiring ancient systems. I poured millions into that place, refusing to cut corners even when the budget strained. Now, as the city's elite clamored for bookings, Lauren simply took it for granted. There was a bitterness to that, but also a strange sense of liberation. For years, my family had measured worth in outward symbols, expensive cars, prestigious addresses, titles printed on business cards. I used to crave that validation, secretly hoping that one day they'd see past my unassuming exterior to the strength underneath. But now, as I watched Lauren's wedding machinery grind forward, I saw it differently. They could have their fairy tale, their picture-perfect day. I had something more real, something I'd built with my own hands. Still, the small slights continued. My name had disappeared from the group text about shower gifts and bachelorette plans. I wasn't included in the matching robes order or asked to help with the playlist or the seating chart. One evening, I called my mom just to check in, trying to ignore the sting in my voice. "Hi, Mom. Just wanted to see how you're holding up with all the wedding stuff." She sounded distracted, almost harried. "Oh, Lauren keeps us busy. So many details to manage. I hope you're not upset about the guest list, honey. Lauren just wants to keep things simple." "Of course, Mom. I want her to have everything she dreams of." A pause. "You're always so understanding. We knew you'd see it our way." Later, as I set down my phone, I felt a pang of something sharp and familiar. Not anger, but a kind of grief, for all the versions of myself I'd hidden just to keep the peace. But I also felt something else. Resolve. I went back to my office, poured a cup of tea, and pulled out the Lakeview Plaza contract again. I read and reread the cancellation clause, letting its meaning settle in my bones. The power in that sentence, a single paragraph buried among dozens, was immense. With one phone call, I could change everything. Was it petty to even consider it? Maybe. But as I thought about all the times I'd been told to be smaller, to shrink, to disappear so that Lauren could shine brighter, I wondered if it was finally time for the balance to shift. Not for revenge. Not to ruin her day. But to remind them that I existed, that I mattered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by my window, city lights sparkling in the distance, and made a list of everything I'd accomplished since the day I walked away from my father's offer. 47 properties across 3 states. 12 luxury hotels. 27 high-end apartment complexes. 9 event venues, including the most exclusive in Chicago. I had teams of people who trusted me, clients who sought me out for my expertise, staff who depended on my judgment. Every one of them saw me more clearly than my own family ever had. At 2 a.m., my phone lit up again. This time, it was Rachel, my assistant, working late as usual. Flagged the Plaza contract. Want me to prepare a memo about the clause history? Also, you should know, the wedding deposit is the largest we've received this year. I smiled at her efficiency. Thanks, Rachel. I'll handle it from here. I closed my eyes and pictured Lauren, standing at the altar, beaming at her perfect crowd. I wondered if, in that moment, she'd finally look around and realize what she'd taken for granted. I wondered if any of them ever would. As dawn broke over the city, I realized that whatever happened next, I was done waiting for permission to take up space in my own story. Whether I cancelled the wedding or not, I had already claimed my power, quietly, fiercely, and without apology. And this time, the world would have no choice but to see me. By the time the third week of April arrived, the city was in full spring bloom. Tulips lined Michigan Avenue, tourists posed at Cloud Gate, and every cafe patio was packed with people laughing under twinkle lights. Lauren's wedding had become the centerpiece of every family conversation and, judging by social media, half of Chicago's, too. But in the quiet of my office, above the city's noise, I was orchestrating something entirely different. The day after I'd resolved to stop shrinking myself, I called Rachel into my office early. She arrived, notebook in hand, ready as always. "Rachel, I need you to pull the full contract file for the Harper wedding at Lakeview Plaza. Every clause. Every payment detail. I want a summary by this afternoon." She nodded. "Is there a problem with the booking?" I met her eyes, allowing a hint of a smile. "Not exactly. I just want to review the fine print one more time." She left, and I turned back to the window, watching the river curve through the city. The decision to act didn't come from anger. It was born from a deep, simmering clarity, the kind that comes when you finally realize your value, whether or not anyone else sees it. By noon, Rachel had emailed a summary, attaching all relevant documents. The cancellation clause was exactly as I remembered: absolute, enforceable, requiring only 72 hours notice. No explanation needed. I reread every line, considering the consequences. Cancelling Lauren's wedding would upend everything: her plans, her pride, my parents' carefully curated social circle. But it would also force a reckoning. For once, they wouldn't be able to erase me. I sat with the idea all afternoon, running through every scenario. Would they beg, bargain, threaten? Would they finally ask why? It wasn't about vengeance. I had no desire to humiliate Lauren. What I wanted was simple: for my family to recognize me, to see the woman I'd become, not the shadow in the corner, not the disappointment, but the one who had quietly, steadily built an empire. At 4 p.m., I picked up my phone and dialed Jennifer Williams, the wedding planner. She answered on the second ring. "Jennifer, this is Megan Harper. We spoke last week about their family situation." A wary pause. "Yes, of course. Again, I'm so sorry for how that unfolded." "No apologies necessary. Actually, I'm calling about something else. Lakeview Plaza will need to cancel the Harper wedding booking." Silence. The kind that prickles at your skin. "Cancel?" Jennifer repeated, as if she couldn't process the word. "But the wedding is in 3 weeks. The deposits." "Section 14B of your contract," I said quietly. "The venue reserves the right to cancel with 72 hours notice and a full refund of all deposits. I'm giving you 3 weeks notice. No penalty." Jennifer's professionalism slipped for a moment. "But why? What's the reason?" "Let's call it a scheduling conflict." She fumbled for another objection. "Is there someone else I should speak to?" "The owner." "You're speaking to her." Another silence, even heavier. "You, your own Lakeview Plaza?" "Yes." along with 8 other venues in Illinois. Jennifer's tone shifted instantly, shock turning to understanding. I had no idea. Most people don't, EI replied. Jennifer, ever the pro, didn't ask further questions. I knew she'd call Lauren next, and then my phone would explode. But for the first time in years, I felt completely calm. Within 30 minutes, the calls began. First Lauren, her number flashing over and over as I let each call roll to voicemail. Then my mother. Then my father. Texts pinged. Megan, urgent. Call me now. What is happening with the venue? Please pick up. This can't be real. Megan, answer your phone. I finished my last meeting of the day before even glancing at the messages. When I finally called Lauren back, her voice was shaking, part fear, part anger, part disbelief. Megan, please tell me this is a misunderstanding. Jennifer says you cancelled the wedding venue. You can't do this. It's my wedding. I listened to her pleas, waited for her to run out of breath, then replied softly. I own the venue, Lauren. I've owned it for almost 2 years. You never asked. A stunned silence followed. But you work for a property company. You live in that tiny apartment. How? My apartment is in a building I own. I drive an old car because I like it. Harper Investments owns 47 properties, Lauren. Lakeview Plaza is just one of them. Her voice broke. Why didn't you ever tell us? When would I have, Lauren? During one of the dinners you didn't invite me to? The engagement party where I was too busy? Or maybe at your bridal shower? For the first time, I heard genuine regret in her voice. We thought you weren't interested in that world. No. You never thought about me at all. We hung up in heavy silence. Less than an hour later, my parents showed up at my office unannounced. Rachel buzzed me. Your parents are here. They seem upset. I let them in, watching them take in the panoramic view, the awards on my shelf, the signed contracts and architectural renderings that lined the walls. My mother's eyes widened with realization. My father just looked tired. Megan, Dad started. Is it true? Do you really own all this? Yes. I own this building. I own Lakeview Plaza. I own every decision I've made in the last 8 years. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Why didn't you tell us? Because you never asked. They sat, suddenly small in the overstuffed chairs. For the first time, I didn't feel like the child in the room. For a long moment, nobody said anything. My mother kept glancing between the city skyline and the framed Harper Investments logo on the wall, as if trying to stitch this new reality onto the old family story she'd lived in for decades. My father was the first to break the silence. Megan, we never meant to. He hesitated, his voice faltering for the first time I could remember. We never meant to make you feel less than your sister. I looked at them both. Really looked. They'd always seemed larger than life, but now, in my office, with the city glittering behind me, they looked smaller, almost fragile. Maybe that was how all parents looked, once you stopped needing them to validate your existence. You didn't just make me feel that way, I said, quietly but clearly. You decided it. Every time you left me out. Every time you dismissed my work. Every time you said Lauren deserved the best and acted like I didn't even belong at the table. My mother pressed a tissue to her eyes, her hands trembling. You have to understand, Megan, we thought you were struggling. You lived so simply. Because I was building something real, I interrupted, my voice steady. Because I wanted substance, not appearances. Because I put every spare dollar, every ounce of energy, into growing this company. And none of you ever asked why. The old patterns almost took over, the urge to comfort them, to soften my words. But I held my ground. This time, I wanted to be heard. Dad finally spoke again. About the wedding. You can't really cancel it. Not now. The deposits. They're fully refundable, I said. The contract was clear, Dad. You should know, I wrote it myself. He flushed, but didn't argue. For the first time, I saw a flicker of respect behind his worry. My mother tried a different tactic. Megan, what do you want? Do you want an apology? For us to beg? I shook my head. No. I want to matter. I want you to understand that I was never just Lauren's shadow. That success isn't about a fancy car or a new condo. It's about building something that lasts, even if nobody's watching. Dad said, You've proved that. God, you've proved that. Is there anything we can do, anything, to make this right? I looked at them both, feeling all the old wounds and old hopes crowding together inside me. That's not up to you, I said at last. It's up to Lauren. She's the one who asked for a wedding without her sister. She's the one who decided I was too bitter and resentful to be in her perfect world. As if conjured by my words, Lauren arrived at my office not an hour later. She looked nothing like the confident woman on her Instagram feed. Her makeup was smudged, and her eyes were red from crying. She took the same seat my father had just left, turning it to face me directly. For once, she didn't try to hide how lost she was. I didn't know, Megan, as she said, her voice shaking. I didn't know any of this. All this time, I thought you just didn't want to be part of the family. I thought you were lost, like you didn't know what you wanted. I nodded. I knew exactly what I wanted. I just didn't need to shout about it. She laughed, a sad, broken laugh. I was so focused on making sure everyone saw my success, I never even looked at yours. I thought I had to be perfect. And all this time, you were more successful than any of us. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The city hummed beyond the glass, oblivious. Megan, I'm sorry, as she whispered. I was horrible to you. I don't even know why I acted that way. Maybe I was jealous, or scared, or just selfish. Will you please come to my wedding? Not as the sister we hide, but as the sister I should have been proud of all along. I studied her, searching for sincerity. I saw it, the same little sister who used to follow me everywhere, who cried when I left for college, who wrote me secret notes when we were kids. That girl was still in there, somewhere. I nodded, but raised a hand. There are conditions, Lauren. Anything, as she said, too quickly. First, you call Jennifer and put my name back on everything. Flowers, seating, photos, all of it. Second, at the reception, you make a toast. You acknowledge to everyone what really happened, and that you're proud of me. And third, we start having regular family dinners again. Real ones, where everyone actually listens. She swallowed, but her eyes were bright for the first time all day. Deal. I'll do it. I already called Jennifer, actually. And you can hold me to the toast. For the first time in years, I let myself believe her. I stood and hugged her, feeling a weight lift from both our shoulders. As she left, I looked out over the city, finally understanding. Sometimes the only way to be seen is to stop hiding. Sometimes you have to make your own space at the table and invite others in. And sometimes you have to rewrite the ending right before the story's over. 3 weeks later, the morning sun spilled through the high windows of Lakeview Plaza. The great hall was alive with the scent of peonies and fresh-cut hydrangeas, the flicker of thousands of candles reflecting off restored marble floors. Even before the first guests arrived, I could feel it in the air, a tension, a possibility, something new. For the first time in years, I wasn't on the sidelines. I stood with Lauren in the bridal suite, helping her fasten the delicate necklace she'd chosen for the day. She looked radiant, nervous, hopeful, her reflection trembling slightly as she tried to pin her veil just right. "Can you believe this is really happening?" she whispered, searching my eyes for something. Reassurance, maybe, or forgiveness. "I can," I replied, smoothing a stray curl behind her ear. "You deserve it, Lauren. And you look beautiful." She squeezed my hand, holding on for a moment longer than she needed to. "I still can't believe you own this place. How did you keep it a secret for so long?" I shrugged, smiling. "You never asked. But honestly, I didn't need you to know back then. Now, maybe I do." A soft knock interrupted us. Mom peeked in, her eyes shining with pride and relief. "Are my girls ready?" She took in the sight of us together, her daughters standing side by side, and for the first time in a long while, I saw real gratitude in her expression. Downstairs, guests gathered in clusters, taking in the grandeur of Lakeview Plaza, the intricate plasterwork, the sweeping staircase, the wall of windows looking out over the lake. The air was full of laughter and the gentle clink of champagne glasses. As the music began and the doors swung open, Lauren made her entrance, every eye in the room on her. For once, I didn't mind being in the background. It felt right. I watched Adam's face light up as he saw Lauren walking toward him, and a ripple of joy moved through the crowd. They exchanged vows, promising forever with words that echoed off the marble and glass, and when the officiant finally declared them husband and wife, the applause felt deeper, warmer, almost like forgiveness. Dinner was a blur of toasts and stories. The table sparkled under the chandeliers, and the staff, my staff, moved quietly, gracefully through the room. Every detail was perfect, down to the last ribbon on each chair. People whispered about how magically the night felt, how the plaza had never looked better. It was everything Lauren had dreamed of, and for the first time, she let herself truly enjoy it. But it was the toast that changed everything. Just after dessert, Lauren stood, glass in hand, and called for attention. The room quieted, the kind of hush that signals something important is coming. She looked at me across the table, her eyes shining, her voice steady. "Before I thank everyone for being here, I need to thank someone very important," as she began, her words carrying to the furthest corners of the hall. "My sister Megan taught me something I was too proud to see. That real success isn't about what people can see, It's about what you build when no one is watching. I spent a long time not seeing my sister. I'm so sorry it took me this long to realize how amazing you are, Megan. And I'm proud to be your sister. There was a beat, and then applause, soft at first, then growing, as people stood to honor not just the bride, but the woman they'd never truly noticed before. I felt my heart catch, not with pain this time, but with hope. Afterward, as the band played and the stars came out over the lake, I slipped onto the terrace for a breath of fresh air. The night air was cool and sweet, the city lights reflected in the water. Dad found me there, hands in his pockets, looking older and more human than I'd ever seen him. Megan, he began, his voice gentler than usual. I owe you an apology too. I spent so many years focusing on Lauren's achievements that I never really saw yours. When you turned down my offer to join the firm, I thought you were making a mistake. I was trying to protect you, but really, I just didn't want to lose control. You built something remarkable, Megan. Not just this business, but tonight, our family. You could have ruined Lauren's wedding to prove a point, but instead, you brought us back together. I'm proud of you. I let his words settle, feeling the truth of them reach places that had stayed closed for too long. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. The night wound down with dancing and stories and laughter that felt real, not forced. For the first time, I didn't feel like a guest at my own family's table. I was a part of it, a sister, a daughter, and finally, just Megan. As I watched Lauren and Adam spin across the floor, Mom and Dad holding hands at their table, I realized something had shifted. Not just in them, but in me. The plaza shone in the darkness, not just as a symbol of what I'd built, but of what I'd reclaimed, my place, my voice, my family. 6 months later, autumn had returned to Chicago. The air carried the scent of wood smoke and rain, and Lake Michigan tossed restless waves against the shore. In a downtown penthouse restaurant, one I'd acquired 2 years before, my family gathered around a candlelit table, laughter and conversation filling the room. Our monthly family dinners had become tradition. One Sunday a month, Lauren and Adam, Mom and Dad, and sometimes even Rachel, my assistant-turned-friend, would come together, no longer out of obligation, but because we wanted to. The awkwardness of that spring was gone, replaced by a kind of warmth I'd never known growing up. That evening, Lauren leaned across the table as dessert arrived, her eyes shining with a familiar, excited energy. Megan, I have news. I smiled, sipping my coffee. Good news or bad news? She laughed. Definitely good. Adam and I are thinking about buying our first investment property. We were hoping you might advise us. I mean, you're the expert. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman changed by humility and love, not competition. Of course. I'd be happy to help. Is it a fixer-upper, or are you looking for something with steady income? Lauren grinned, a little sheepish. Probably something small to start. But Adam says we have a good eye now, after all those house tours. Mom and Dad joined in the conversation, asking real questions about the process, about risks and rewards. My father even admitted, with a wink, that my business model was a little more sophisticated than the old family agency. For the first time, it wasn't about one-upping or keeping score. It was about sharing what we'd learned, together. At the end of the night, as the city lights flickered beyond the glass, Lauren reached over and squeezed my hand. There's more, as she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. If we ever have a daughter, We want to name her Megan. So she'll know that success isn't about how loudly you talk or how much attention you get. It's about what you build, quietly, steadily, when nobody's watching. My throat tightened, and for a moment I couldn't speak. All those years of silence and invisible work, of watching from the shadows, had led here, to a table full of people who finally saw me. Later, as we stepped out into the cool night, Dad walked beside me, his pace slow and reflective. "You know, Megan," he said, "I thought I was teaching you all the important lessons. Turns out, I was the one who needed to learn." I smiled. "We're all still learning, Dad." He slipped his arm around my shoulders, the gesture as natural as breathing. "I'm glad you didn't listen to me when I tried to keep you small. This family is stronger for it." As we reached the curb, Mom and Lauren joined us. The city hummed with life, cars, laughter, street music. For the first time, I felt anchored, not by what I'd accomplished alone, but by what we'd built together. Looking back, it wasn't the contracts signed or properties acquired that mattered most. It was the quiet moral victory, the slow, steady way the world shifted when I finally claimed my place in it. I hadn't needed to ruin Lauren's wedding or shame my family into understanding. I only needed to be myself, unapologetically, fully, in my own skin. Over time, word spread in our old circles about the real story behind Lakeview Plaza and the Harper family. But the gossip didn't matter. The people who counted knew the truth, that strength isn't always loud, that resilience sometimes looks like silence, and that the ones you overlook may be quietly changing the world. On the anniversary of Lauren's wedding, we gathered again, this time in my home. No more exclusions, no more careful avoidance. The house was full of laughter, spilled wine, and stories, Lauren's toast echoing through the room, heir to second chances, to family, and to the sister who showed us what quiet strength really means. As I stood at the window, watching the city lights blink on one by one, I understood what true success looked like. Not a number, not a building, not even the respect of others, but the peace of knowing I was seen, at last, for who I was. Sometimes, the best kind of revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living your life until the people who matter finally see you. And, if you're lucky, learning to see them too, before it's too late.